Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. We're on here Monday through Friday from 2 Eastern Time. We're actually in Vegas right now, so it's 11 o'clock our time. The call-in number is 646-200-4169, or we have the chat room open. We'd love to hear from you. Michael Ryce.
Thank you, sweetie. Good morning, everybody. It's a delight. Or if you're in the time zone where it's afternoon, good afternoon. Of course, that kind of proves that time's an illusion, because here we are in the morning, and some of you folks are listening in the afternoon. How does that work? Maybe we made it all up. Well, you know, it's kind of like a lot of things we've done in our world, is we've made it all up, and it's time for us to start to let go of what we made up. And sometimes it can be a challenge to let go of what we've made up, because it's been going on for so many generations. Our mind makes it look so real. Actually, we just got off the phone talking to someone who went through a major healing process, and his previous addiction, and maybe he's on the phone, maybe he'll tap in or call in, but his addiction previously was gambling, and he just went through a major healing crisis, and on the other side of it, he was just sharing with me how seductive his mind made it, gambling look, and that God really wanted him to go back to gambling. And so it was kind of interesting to hear that story, and how the whole process of forgiveness opens a space for something different to happen in us and for change to occur. And this morning I'm coming with a thought. Well, actually, David, are you there?
I am.
Well, good morning, David. How are you this morning?
I'm doing very well, Michael. Thank you. Doing very well. You were saying you
awesome. Hard to hear you. Speak a little closer to the phone, maybe.
Okay, I'm changing. Okay, how's that?
Better.
Good.
We have an ongoing saga. Before I get into the other topic I was thinking about, we have an ongoing saga. For those that were on the show yesterday, David was sharing how he had tapped into his working with his cousin on dealing with issues around his son going to prison, and how powerful it was as the father who'd pretty much disowned his son went into the court and in front of the judge expressed his love for the son that he basically wanted to ignore, and how powerful that was, and what it brought up for David in our processing was, okay if I go ahead and share it, David?
Please, sure. Yes.
Yeah. So my suggestion to David, if you remember, if you were on the show yesterday, David, we talked about, or David described the whole situation, and I put in that when we had talked about it earlier yesterday morning, there was a lot of grief and a lot of tears coming up for David around talking about that issue. And so we offered or I had offered to David the suggestion that perhaps it wasn't about his cousin expressing love to his son, but his father expressing love to him. And so from there, David, what opened up? What happened?
Well, you know, as we talked about it, when you mentioned it yesterday, and then last night, well, then I decided that, you know, that it was important for me to take a look at that, or at least rather important. You know, one of the things that I've learned about being around this work and being with you and listening to people is that when I get feedback from someone, whether it's important for me to take that feedback and explore it and to see if there's anything there for me to look at. So when I woke up this morning, it was still on my mind, so I knew that there was something there for me to look at, and I was recognizing that it was true that my working with Terry was my covert way, or maybe my unconscious way of taking a look and seeing what it is that is going on in my life. And so I looked at that, and I remembered about some events around with my father, and as I remember the first time that I was locked up, they got locked up, and one of the statements that my father had said prior to that is growing up with myself and two older brothers was that if you guys ever get locked up, don't call me. And so I didn't. And then later on, he talked with me about it and asked me the question, why didn't you call me? I said, because you told me never to call you. And that was just one of the incidents. And what I got to recognize is that myself and locking into and being, there must have been some emotions and some feelings, it was, of anger and resentment around in the statement making. And then I got to see that my father was just wanting to take care of me, to protect me in a way. And it opened up the way for me to look at a lot of the different ways that my father was wanting to tell me that he loved me by doing things in a way of from threat to keep me from doing something. It's kind of like going back to the conversation with Barry yesterday in regards to his daughter doing something and where would he, seeing that she would be, what the consequences would be from that. And what I'm realizing is that the behaviors that I've been doing with my sons and with my family and with other people is really this way of, if I could just get them to follow these instructions, if I could get them to do their forgiveness work, then I wouldn't have to. And that's the bottom line piece of all of it. And so by talking with Terry and talking with you and using the tools, that sadness that you were referring to, I have no idea what the sadness was about. I allowed myself to go through that sadness. I allowed it to come up, and there was more to it than just being sad about that. There was a combination. There was just a tremendous amount of it. I've been shedding a lot of tears, and a lot of emotions have been coming up over the last several weeks. This isn't like, there's just this one thing. And I think that in today's psychology out there or in the self-help type things, it's like, wow, if I could just find this one thing and get that one piece handled, then I'm done with it. And that's not the case. This was just culminating through doing the work with Terry and doing my work, and it just kind of brought it all to the surface. And as you mentioned to me this morning, generational. So I did the MindShifter that you talked about, and as a matter of fact, Terry just completed breathing me about 20 minutes ago or so. And he said, well, that was really rather quick, and it was a process that I got to see. There was like minimal, if any, drama and trauma around it. I was able to be with my generation of males, so to speak, and knowing that, how should I say, that it wasn't that I've let go of the attachment and the connection of what it is that I was keeping hidden. It may not make sense, but it's like, let me tell you what, during the breath session, I was visualizing and inviting my uncles and my dad's brothers and all that to have them there in my presence, like with some of the things that they have done. And what I recognized, Michael, was that I had some condemnation about what their behaviors and what they had done, which was what was locking in my emotions and my fears or sadness, anger, and so forth. As soon as I let go of that, then there wasn't anything there. I mean, there wasn't anything. What was there was just this relationship, just this conversation, just this acknowledgement of each other that we all have our stuff to process through. So I don't know if that really makes sense, especially when they might be listening to this information for the first time. But it's like when you talked about that I was looking for my father to express love to me because of the resentment and the condemnation and the anger that I had towards him. I wasn't able to see all of the times, or to even see it from his perspective of what it was that he was wanting to do. That in his way, in the best way that he knew how, and how he was doing it was the best that he could do. And I don't know. I'm rambling on now. So I'm open to some feedback.
Yeah, from in our conversation this morning, to look at how he came from a macho, tough, beat him up kind of world, which is the world you were brought up in, and the reason why I'm asking you to share this is to give people a sense of, some of the depth that things go to when we begin to heal. And the MindShifter tool is a tool that we use, that you split a page into, you draw a line down the center of a page, just to give a little background on that tool, and you write the mind shifter on one side of the page. Because the mind works by the law of resonance, that mind shifter gets brain cells firing for what's in the mind, whether it's conscious or available information or hidden unconscious information. And the idea of the mind shifter is to resonate or surface those things that are hidden. So, David, perhaps you'd share the mind shifter that you wrote that opened this space and moved things forward.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, and it was oh gosh. And now, it's kind of interesting of how this works. Once that the things are cleared, it's like that there's nothing there to even remember them. So as far as even remember the mind shifter, let me walk in here and see if I can locate it, and I'll give you an idea. Okay. The deep experience of receiving my Father's love awakens the true essence in being for the men in all my generations. So, again, in talking about that, what happened with me was that it was like I was, in my breast thing, it was like I opened up the space for my uncle just to be my uncle, for my dad just to be my dad, to acknowledge that where they were at in their space. And so that's what the mind shift was.
Cool. So that if that gives everybody a sense, and what we want to do is give people a taste of what's possible as you begin to do your inner work and work through those issues. And I love what Richard Bach says in his book Illusions. We teach best that which we most need to learn. And when we're in the space of prompting someone else, usually our prompting to someone else is reflected out of the content of our own minds. And so as you're talking to your cousin about his son and how he wants to disown his son, doesn't want anything to do with his son, and as he listens to you and actually wants to totally cut the conversation off. If you want to talk about my son, then I don't even want to talk to you. And as you keep prompting him, he finally has a breakthrough. And this is, one of the aspects of the community part of this work is that the support, very few people in isolation can move the unconscious data, the pain, the trauma that's held out of their structures alone. It's very rare that someone could do that. And so the community aspect here, you support, you see an issue, which of course is generated in your brain between your cousin and his son, and in seeing that issue, yes, it's valid for them, but when you recognize you have emotion around it, which when we were talking yesterday morning, it was deep. I would classify it more as grief than just sadness. And so when I have some form of hostility, fear, grief, pain around something that I see in the world, it's because I haven't resolved that one in myself. And so as you spoke about that and that grief, you could hardly speak without tears coming up, then that's when I said, well, okay, so what has this got to do with your relationship with your dad and the opening there? So we prompt the healing in others, we support the healing in others, and, a lot of it's done with smoke and mirrors. And, of course, there's only one way that we can really see an issue, and that is we've got to have the brain cells for it. So when our mind serves up a reality, the realities in our minds always tell us more about the content of our minds than the world we think we're looking at. So as you recognize that, and you can see something from two perspectives. You can see it from the perspective of you've worked it through, and so you are the space of love for that, or you see it from the perspective of where you have some pain or grief around it, and that means that it's also your work. So it's just awesome to watch how it all works together, and I hope this gives everybody a taste of another level of what the work that we're talking about looks like, and that there is no reason for any form of hostility, fear, pain, or trauma, except that we have that form of hostility, fear, pain, or trauma inside of us. And as Tim shared with us yesterday, the way that you test whether or not a trauma you're feeling is yours or not, are you feeling it? And once you recognize that, it's a clue, and together we support each other in, moving through those layers and those issues. So it's an awesome process, David. Congratulations in it. And I think it was really powerful when we were speaking this morning that you shared the confusion that you had when you were getting ready to go after you'd finished your training. You're getting ready to go to Vietnam, and your dad drives several hundred miles to come and see you. And says, gee, son, if you don't want to do this, I'll find a way for you to get to Canada. This is back in the Vietnam era. And when you spoke to me and shared that what your reality around that was confusion, like, what's he saying this for? And off you go to Vietnam. As you work through this, all of a sudden the realization comes is what your father was saying was, I cherish you, I love you, and I'm willing to protect you if need be, though he was so macho he couldn't say those words. That, in essence, was the message he was delivering to you. And to be able to receive that now, and how many years ago is that? Several decades.
Do I dare say 1968?
Yeah. 68, so that's 43 years ago.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2011, and it's exactly the same energy, exactly the same as it was. Time is an illusion. Time doesn't exist. And it's something that we make up to keep events separate, but very, very powerful, David. Thank you for being willing to share that, and thank you for your willingness to do your work. In 4 years at Heartland, I've watched you just jump in and go for it, and in a way that I've never seen anybody consistently, step by step, just do your process and support others in the same. It's been awesome to be part of. It's cool.
Thank you. And what's really so fabulous about today, and I'm grateful that Terry was there to breathe me. And for those that are listening that know about the breath work, that's another tool. And he said, wow, that was quick. And it was quick. And it was gentle. It was gentle. It was calm. Unlike some other processes that I've been through with it, and to me, it just validates that the more that I do it, then the gentler that it is, the calmer, the quicker that it went. I mean, I went through it very quick, and that's what was really, really rewarding about it. Now, getting to that particular place, for letting all of it go, has been some work. And as you said, that's the part that is the challenge. And on my own, I would never be at this particular place. As much as I like to tell myself that I would be, and as much work that I know that I've done, it's like, oh, well, I've done this. Well, I haven't done this. Certainly haven't done this by myself, and would have never been able to get the peace that you just talked about unless I talked with you. Would not have been able to shift through. Now, maybe so eventually, after 48 and 43 more years of holding it. Okay, well, this was the process that worked through. So, yeah, it's fabulous. Thank you, and Jeannie and Terry and the audience for listening, and for Tim and for my cousin Terry for being willing to hang in there, because he hung in there with me as I encouraged him. He did the exercises. He's never done a worksheet, a forgiveness worksheet, just to let people know. He hasn't even done that, yet he understands what it is that happened with him in this healing process, and he was willing to shift from looking at it from the filter of hostility and fear and anger and shift to the space of love. And just in that willingness to do that made that whole shift, and he got it. He got it he told me, he says, you're absolutely right, David. If I had gone in that courtroom feeling the way that he had felt prior to that, he knows that how it would have turned out. He knows that. So that's very, very powerful indeed.
Yeah, and as you speak of how gentle the opening was, and I know because we've processed it, you've done a lot of work around your relationship with your dad, it doesn't get to be much bigger an issue than the issue of love between a father and a son. The traditional, father-son conflict, and cleaning that up it's a monumental piece of work. And, of course, the only other issue that probably matches it is the cleaning up of a woman's relationship with her mother. And those are the dynamics that need to be dealt with and processed and moved through. And it's awesome to be part of watching that and be part of supporting that happening.
Yeah,
so that's our work.
As you and I were talking this morning about relationships with my true essence, with the true creator, and until I work, and this is my perception of it, until I work through those issues with my power persons, with my parents, then to have a relationship with anyone, it's always going to reflect that back, as if in a marriage or in a romantic relationship. It's always going to show me that, wow, I've got to take care of this. That's the codependence, the interdependence, and whoever is listening to this and is interested in finding out more about that, that would be the DVD to get that Michael has taken to a whole new level over the last couple of years. Very, very powerful to get an understanding about how to heal the relationship with the parents.
Michael?
Yes, sweetie.
Okay, since we're talking about relationships and the MindShifters, I would like to share an email. There's no questions out in the chat room or no hands up in the switchboard, but I did get an email from a young lady the other day, and she may be on the line. If she wants to add to this, then she can press 1 and it will pop your hand up. Otherwise, I'm not going to mention names. But she had difficulty in a relationship, and she always saw that it was, this other person. She wanted their relationship to be close, intimate, and he did not. And yet she continually stayed with him, even though, they'd be on and off and on and off. And she was like, what do I need to do here? I really want a relationship. Anyway, I had written her an email back and basically, said absolutely, that having a relationship with someone is awesome, that, we are love. It's the stuff we're made of. But to have another person on the same path to share our life with and to make love with, the intimacy with another being, that it amplifies the power that's within us. And then I went on to tell her, there were areas that Michael and I do separately, like I'm in school and he's not, and he likes documentaries and I don't, and but there are areas that we're not exactly in sync, but we are both headed in the same direction, and we're both working on cleaning up our garbage and having a path together. And that in my opinion, the relationship needs to be two people heading in the same direction, not necessarily that every single thing is identical, but that they both are wanting the same thing out of life. And to enjoy having someone there to share your life with was what the Creator intended, and that it wasn't just all about procreating, but that, just to have someone there with you to help amplify the love that you are. And then I had shared some other worksheets, for her to use and everything. Well, then I got an email back from her, and she says, last week after reading your email about relationships over and over again, I realized that I have been the one hanging on to this gentleman. He's given me a lot of feedback on my dissociated mind, but when it became clear to me that between him and I there was not a true relationship, then I started to work even more on my issues and become more aware of them. I did the Mind Shifter. I chose numbers 1-8, and you can explain a little more about that, but her Mind Shifter, by choosing 1-8, says commitments are easy to keep and bring joy and fulfillment and serve the purpose of my life. And so that, she says, brought me the gift of owning my being accountable. And then I saw it almost like a movie, all the moments of my life when I felt like I was a victim, and also my issues with this gentleman, and that he was never, ever accountable for anything, but he always twisted everything around and made up excuses to avoid responsibility with himself or me or anybody else. It was like turning off an electrical switch. After I worked through the issue, I have no desire to relate to him other than being a casual acquaintance, whereas before it was like she couldn't, she'd be with him and not with him and with him and not with him, and it was like she couldn't let him go. And so once she had dealt with her issues and her own being accountable for how she was creating it, then all of a sudden her desire changed, and she no longer needed to be with him other than being a casual acquaintance. Then, on the other hand, all of a sudden, one of her dance students, who she's known for over 5 years, becomes someone in her life that could possibly be something else, and she started dating him. And he's emotionally available, whereas this other gentleman wasn't, and he wants to create a loving space of healing. And so it looks like just by doing the Mind Shifter and working on her issues, she's totally changed the relationships that are going on in her life.
It's so awesome, and I know who you're speaking of, and she has been so committed to doing her work and has made so many major, major shifts. And I don't know if you've put those details, those emails and such out on the frequently asked questions yet or not, but that'd be good stuff to put out there for somebody to be able to follow that progression and see what real healing does. And, when we're in our Healing Through Relationships workshop, we talk about, relationships based in matching bags of garbage. And oftentimes our attraction is simply that we unconsciously know we need to clean this up, and this is the person that's going to be able to show it to us. And to me, that's just a verification that once she cleaned up the issue that had her, and if I remember correctly, I believe it was about a 5-year relationship or 7 years, I'm remembering.
5 years, I think.
That she's just got this attachment and this attraction, and she's got to be with this man, and she wants to be intimate with this man. And all of a sudden, once she cleans up that piece of her mind that he was reflecting to her, it's like, okay, well, see you later. That attachment's gone, and this space is opened to create something totally and completely different. And so that, what we're talking about with what you shared, David, and what we're talking about with this issue with this gal, it's exactly the fruit of the work. It's the results that you get to produce when you start doing your work instead of, SSDD, same stuff, different day, hanging out in the same old reality, the same old issue with the same old people, or finding new people to hang out with the same old issue and the same old reality, that as you change the realities output from your mind, which is the core of the forgiveness process. And if you're new to the show, if you haven't yet tapped into the forgiveness process, please go to www.whyagain.com. On the right-hand side, download worksheets. Click that link. The first 2 items. The first item is a set of instructions for how to do the worksheet. The second item is the actual worksheet itself. Download those, Start following those instructions. You don't have to do it perfectly. Just put the pen to the paper and watch how things start to shift and start to change. And it's so awesome to watch that happen. Yeah, that's just fabulous.
And Michael, may I add?
Yes.
With the codependence to interdependence, and with the healing through relationships, you and Jeannie do a beautiful illustration of what usually happens is that once all of a sudden, we get into a relationship and it takes less and less time for those things to surface. And so then the relationship is just killed off, and it's like then, okay, the hell with relationships. And a lot of people choose then to, rather than to even have a relationship, then there's this, what's the sense, what's the use in all of it? And it speeds up, it happens quicker and quicker. That was the point I wanted to make with it, that, though the things can be hidden for a while, they will eventually surface, and it is, the same type of relationship. So, thought I would throw that in.
Cool. Fabulous. And the work of forgiveness, if you're new to the show, the work of forgiveness is not about letting other people off the hook for what's going on inside of us, but rather to be responsible for and to remove from us that which never belonged in a human energy field. And we establish what belongs in the human energy field by tapping into the definition of human life. And when you hold a newborn child and you describe the essence of that newborn in a single word, your word will be some variation on the theme of love. That's my experience of having asked that question of many, 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 many thousands of people. And so anything unlike that active presence of love doesn't belong in a human field. Now, it'd be kind of hard to tell that from the way our culture works, but that's the truth about us as human beings. And so once I realize that there's something in me that's less than love, how do I tell? I'm the one who's feeling it. And one of the games of what we call the non-being mind, of the non-human self, the self that we need to be getting rid of, or forgiving, that is, removing, is, it always has a projection. It always has a way of saying, no, somebody else is the problem in my life. You did this to me. You made me angry. You made me sad. You made me afraid. And so the question I wanted to open the show with today, and we're getting to it now, is the one that says, which is always my response in workshops, if they're the one with the problem, why are you the one with the pain or the turmoil? Obviously, if they had a problem, they'd be in pain or turmoil. Notice they have a big smile on their face while you're crashing internally. And if you're crashing internally, it's because you're getting the opportunity to do an awesome piece of work. Whether it's a type of a piece of work like what we shared with David and what David just went through, and Terry, the acknowledgement to you for being willing to be there to support David in that process. It's so powerful to have a community to work with. Or whether it's the type of issue that Jeannie just shared in the letter with this woman who's just been moving through all kinds of issues. If I'm in pain, there's something in my structure that's off base. And by the way, Jeannie, as you introduced that letter and you were speaking about the purpose of relationship, I'd like to just take a moment to just acknowledge and appreciate you for the fact that you're in my world and you're in my life and that you're on this path with me moving in a direction. Yeah, we have our stuff that comes up, but that we're both willing to do our work and to support each other in letting go of that stuff. It's an awesome gift to me, and you are appreciated and cherished for it. Thank you.
Thank you. I love being there.
So our calling number is
646-200-4169.
If anybody has any comments, questions about anything that we've said, we'd love to hear from you. Anything in the chat room, honey, that's...
No, everybody's just sitting there listening today.
Oh, cool. Well, hopefully they're listening, just listening because it's meaningful, and if it triggers something in you, We'd love to hear from you. We perhaps could support you with, something like a mind shifter if this brings an issue up for you, and give you some support in doing that. And as we recognize that if I'm the one with the pain, I'm the one with the problem, then rather than being the hero in our own minds and wanting to blame everybody else, and seeing ourselves as the champion in every wonderful situation we find ourselves, and you recognize that perhaps those places where you want to be the champion of the wonderful situation is much rarer than you would like it to be, then rather than having a conversation about somebody else, how you made me, you'd made me, it's interesting. If you watch, and here's one of the sure signs of the non-being mind, you'll watch people who'll say things like, well, Charlie really made me angry and upset yesterday, and then they'll go on and have a whole conversation about Charlie and not say another word about what's going on inside themselves, which is anger and upset. If you've got anger and upset, guess what? You have a problem. You are not designed for anger and upset. Anger and upset is a totally useless and destructive frequency in the human field. It's got to go. We need to be getting rid of it because we are, as humanity, on the verge of destroying ourselves over that. We had a young lady, I did a workshop at a medical center out in Pahrump, Nevada last night. And there was a woman there who was talking about how, she's a bartender and she's always trying to please people, and so she just would take it and go home and have migraine headaches because she would just take everybody's garbage and as they'd heap it on her. And she went to a therapist, and her therapist said, well, why don't you just get safe and go ahead and blast them back? Just shoot your anger back at them. It's okay to get angry. And so she expressed how delighted she was that she took her therapist's advice and she started to get angry with people who were dumping things on her. And it seemed to her like the ideal solution. And her migraine stopped, but here she is in a medical office with some other symptomatology going on. And as I fed back to her, and she wanted to really struggle to keep her anger because she found something to protect against these people dumping on her, but didn't realize she was inflicting a disorder on herself in order to do that, and that's not required. But if you think about that, what a great solution. Somebody dumps on me, inappropriate, they need to be held accountable, and I shoot back with anger, so it scares them off. What kind of logical conclusion happens in the world with that kind of solution? Well, the logical conclusion is you begin to get larger and larger and larger numbers of angry, rage-filled people. And, of course, when that crescendos, what do we get? We get somebody driving down the highway that, gets cut off by accident by someone, and the person who's cut off, in their rage, pulls alongside of the other car, pulls out a gun, and shoots somebody. What a great solution. Just get angry with people, and then they'll back off and be afraid. Well, now we've got a world filled with angry, fearful people. What kind of insanity does that lead to? Well, just pick up your morning newspaper. Just, turn on the TV right now. Just go to CNN or NBC or any of them, and just listen to the effects of anger and rage in our society. And it's bizarre, and it's insane. So what I offered to her, and it took several back-and-forth conversations for her to be willing to say, maybe anger isn't my best option here. But what I suggested was that she might want to do some worksheets around being dumped on. And she had spoken about how as a kid she was abused and dumped on, and in her job as a bartender she was dumped on, and in her relationship with her spouse she was dumped on. It's like, well, maybe what you need to be doing, notice your why is this happening to me again, is being dumped on. So here's my suggestion. Put the pen to the paper. Start doing some worksheets around being dumped on. And then, instead of having to be in a disordered state of anger all the time, to protect yourself, you could let go of the thing in you that attracts people to dump on you. And what you'll probably find is being dumped on will disappear from your life. Here you are now in a peaceful state. People don't dump on you because you're not energetically asking to be dumped on all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're a person who's getting dumped on that you're to blame for being dumped on. You're just responsible for being dumped on. You know, why is it without instructions that she could go from a home to a job to her relationship with her spouse, and the bottom line is she's always being dumped on? You know, people marry spouses and they have awesome, wonderful, delightful relationships and times together. What's the problem with someone who's being dumped on? Oh, I hold a reality. And then with this young woman, we got into the conversation about what she did with her thoughts at the punishment part of the worksheet when we got into that. And she's got all this rhetoric running in her mind. It's like, notice how you're continuously abusing yourself with your own thoughts. You're dumping on yourself. You're telling yourself things about how it's going to be worse tomorrow and it'll never get better and things could never change and I could never improve it. And notice how you terrorize yourself with your own thoughts. Hello? Of course the world is going to come up and dump on you if that's your game. So the work starts on the inside. When do I decide to think only gentle, respectful, loving thoughts about myself? And somebody says, well, but those things aren't true about me. Okay, so what do you need to do to make them true about you? What do you need to forgive? What do you need to let go of in order to change that dynamic? And when you do, guess what? Life around you is going to start to shift and change. It's an awesome process. Absolutely awesome.
Michael?
So any thoughts in the chat room, Jeannie, or calls?
Yep, we have a question in the chat room.
Yes.
They want to know, do you really believe that we're on the verge of destroying ourselves, or could we be just surfacing all the things unlike love in our collective energetic systems, or could it be something else?
Okay, well, my take is that, it's up for grabs. It's up for possibilities. When you look at the research, I think I've shared a couple of times recently on the show that I did some research, and there's a guy whose specialty is studying murder on planet Earth. And he says there are 200 million documentable murders that have happened on planet Earth over the history of man. And that approximately 130 million of the 200 million happened in the last century. I think the heat is cranking up. I think the insanity is growing. And at the same time, I think you're absolutely right. There are healing modalities coming forward. There are a lot of people. You know, we're doing the best we can do to take the tools we've discovered from the Aramaic to every mind, heart, and being on the planet, and there are many people doing that. So there is a tremendous upwelling and upsurging of healing and responsibility and moving forward. And it doesn't change the fact that we have all of these wars going on around the globe, these different conflicts that are happening. You know, again, open the newspaper any day and look at how many murders there were in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles or what have you. And there's some pretty crazy stuff happening. So to me, the outcome is not yet determined. To me, we've got both things happening. And are enough people going to choose? There's an interesting thing. If you go back, there's actually a CD that I did many years ago. Actually, it goes back about 25 years ago. It's called Pyramid Prophecy, and it looks at, in that CD, it looks at the structure of the pyramids, and there's a measurement called the pyramidal inch. And the passageway into or up to the king's chamber has markings on it. And when you take the pyramidal inch dimension and you look at these markings, you find that virtually every important event in history is recorded, or there's a mark for it specifically on this pyramidal scale, delineating the year in which those things happened and the dates. It's pretty detailed. And this is a tape I did at least 25 years ago. And, I had put away. I've never listened to it, never thought about it since I did it. But someone contacted me a couple of days after 9/11 and said, Michael, do you realize what you said in that Pyramid Prophecy tape that you did years ago? They had recently listened to it. I said, well, no, actually I don't. Tell me about it. And 25 years ago, I had shared that the final date that shows up at the end of this passage that goes to the King's Chamber, and when you get to the end of the passage, you've got two choices. You either go down into what was called the pit of unknowing, unconsciousness, oblivion, destruction, or you go up into the King's Chamber, enlightenment, awareness, aliveness. So the passage ends, and you've got to make a choice to go up or down. The final date, and this is something that I said in the CD or tape back then, 25 years ago, the final date that was indicated in the passage was September 17th, 2001, 9/11. It was 6 days after 9/11. And I believe, that we were coming to the point. I think that the whole act of terrorism that occurred there, not so sure who did it, but that's not really relevant here, allowed us as human beings to look at the way we terrorize ourselves and each other, confronted us with that. And symbolically, did we go up into the King's Chamber or did we go down into the pit of unknowing? I hold the space, and I believe that enough humans made the choice to shift upward that we went to the King's Chamber. We went to the path of enlightenment. And most of humanity is still moving down toward the pit. That's why we have the war and violence we do, whether it's in the home or in the streets or in the communities or on the globe. So if we're moving upward and we've got a critical mass, we don't have to get the majority of humanity to go to this higher space, because the higher frequency is more powerful and more penetrating. All we have to do is go to the higher space. And if enough people go there, Yeshua expressed this principle. He said, a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. And as we make the choice to go to that higher space, something different happens. And there's an energy of human life, the active presence of love, that pervades all of humanity. I think the struggle's still going on. I hold the space that we're moving toward critical mass and heading for the upper path. I hope that adequately addresses your question, at least from the perspective of where I see it. Any other questions there, Jeannie?
I had to undo my mute button, sorry. Two comments. One says, are we responsible for creating everything we are experiencing in our outer world as a means to reveal within us something we need to heal? I can call it in, or he can answer it from here. So the person said she could call in or do it from there. So she wants to know, are we responsible for creating everything we are experiencing in the outer world as a means to reveal something that we need to deal with inside? And then another person wrote in and said, I'm holding the space of love that we as a people will transcend the fear and hostility, and we shall remember our enlightenment.
Yes. I'll certainly go for that. And yeah, I think that individually and collectively, we set up and create, probably the greatest atrocity done to us down through the ages and that we've bought into is that we've had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. And most everybody goes, I'm in pain, you did it to me. Look, it's all your fault. You just look at the language of the culture is so projection-oriented. And so when we deny creatorship and we deny what's going on inside of us, we keep it hidden, and therefore through that we set up and create what happens in our lives. If you look at the ancient physics language Aramaic, they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. The heart, in our modern updated language, as we're using it in context with this work, is a state of unconsciousness created when we deny ownership for what's going on inside of us. So when I deny, I dissociate from what I don't want to deal with. When I dissociate from what I don't want to deal with, I hide in myself that which I most need to deal with. And so it reflects in my outer world. And so individually we do that, and then on a larger collective level we do that. You know, if you have a country where millions of people believe war is the way to get what you want, then collectively we create that result. And there's an interesting principle that was given 2,000 years ago that hasn't been heard yet that said, if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. And that was just speaking about the way physics works. As a creator, if you engage in a certain energy, that energy is going to produce a result. And if it's the action is that of attack of another, then you just set up the creative act that will bring attack back to you. You know, you look at the fact that we're the only country in the world that's dropped the atomic bomb, and what is most everybody terrified of today? Somebody's going to get in here with an atomic bomb, a dirty bomb. Well, you know something? That is exactly what is structured in the field, energetically. Now, if enough of us say, I got it, I no longer need to live by the sword. I no longer need to make cutting remarks to another. I no longer need to attack. I can live as love. Then I become the space that dissolves the attack. And as I dissolve the attack, those who would respond with attack have a weaker field to bounce off of. And when a critical mass of people, again, a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, when a critical mass of people say, I got it, attack, war, killing others is not the way to get what we want. The way to get what we want is to recognize our creatorship and our human lives, which is love, and we join in that love, then we literally weaken the frequency of the attack that we've done. When we begin to forgive, we remove that frequency of attack. That is, not forgiving them, but going inside of ourselves and removing what never belonged. When the frequency in us that issues a command that someone should come and attack us, how do you strengthen that one? Just keep attacking people. Each time you attack, you create a stronger field in yourself over the high energy wave that leaves your mind that says, hey, I need somebody to come and attack me. When I decide to go inside myself, and all the tools that we're talking about are about going inside of yourself and remove your very capacity to attack. Remove the inclination to attack and replace it with the inclination to love, to be the space of healing, to be the space of support, to be the world where instead of seeing everybody as enemy or only those closest to us as friend, where we start to see that every other person shares our humanity and we reach out through a loving space, we change what's structured in the field. And that principle, if you live by the sword and you die by the sword, you shift. And you shift into, if you live by love, then you live by love. And that's what comes to you. That's what you create. So we're looking to create, to shift the creative patterns in our lives into aliveness, awareness, joy, creativity, a true human life as humans are designed to live. And again, it's easy to determine how humans are designed to live. Just hold a newborn child. You'll know exactly what humans are designed for. And sadly, very quickly, when those newborns come in, the world starts to put thumbprints of hostility and fear, unknowingly in many cases that that's what they're doing. They're just passing on the family tradition. And we're here to forgive all the family traditions based in any form of violence and move to an actual human life.
Michael,
yes, sweetie.
Someone in the chat room was wanting to know the name of the sound of the universe that is love, and I think they're referring to the Schumann resonance. We have about 4 minutes left. Would you speak towards that and tell them that story?
Well, read for me again the question that was asked.
It says, will you remind me of the name of the sound in the universe that is love?
Okay. Well,
and I think you've told the story before about the resonance that is
right
from the earth to people.
Well, when you look at the structure, the bony structure of the human form, it's in a state of continuous motion, and it moves at a rate of approximately 8 to 12 cycles per minute. And the planet puts off a thing called the Schumann resonance that moves at approximately that same rate. And when I first started to understand that, I used to think that the Earth gave off this frequency, and therefore we, growing up out of the Earth, picked up on that frequency. We had an antenna structured by our growing up out of the energy field of the Earth that would pick up that frequency coming from the planet and reflect in the movement of the bony structure, the head, the spine, and the pelvis. And that's called the cranial rhythm. And then there was a group of people up in Canada several years ago that were measuring and tracking the Schumann resonance, which seemed to be getting weaker and weaker and weaker until it came to the point where they could no longer measure it coming from the Earth, which seemed pretty strange. And what they discovered was there was one place they could measure that frequency, and that was where there was a major sporting event and the home team scored, which meant, of course, everybody flips into a place of delight and joy. Now, I would offer that, or that piece of information reversed my thinking. Not that we grew up out of the Earth and reflected the frequency that was coming off of the Earth, the Schumann resonance, but the reverse. Humans were the antenna that picked up that frequency to feed it to the Earth. And my thesis is that one of the reasons for so much trauma on the Earth, the earthquakes, the volcanoes, the tsunamis, one of the reasons for that is because the Earth is trying to shake itself loose. And according to NASA, the Earth is a living being. And the Earth is attempting to bring forward the frequency that it needs. And we humans, having gone out of harmony with joy and delight, have stopped feeding the Earth what it needs. If you have a small child whose cranial structure, that is the movement of the bones of the head, are locked up, that child will oftentimes become a headbanger. They'll sit and bang and bang and bang and smash their heads on the wall until the cranium is loosened and it goes back into its proper rhythm. If the proper work is done on that child, that rhythm will be opened, the movement will be restored, the child will stop being a headbanger. The child is intuitively banging its head, knowing there's something going on here that's locked up and I need to loosen it. I think that the gyrations of the Earth with all of these anomalies in weather and catastrophes, I believe that's the Earth attempting to restore its rhythm, attempting to get loose that which is missing because we humans have gone out of harmony with joy. And as we go back into harmony with our natural state, as we go back into our proper rhythm, we will feed to the Earth that which we are designed to feed to the Earth. And the Earth will go back into a proper peaceful rhythm that it was designed to live out of, that we are designed to live out of. And so our work in sharing these tools of the man named Yeshua is to bring the awareness of these tools to every mind, heart, and being on the planet, and to support every mind, heart, and being on the planet, forgiving, removing every interfering frequency with love. A life without drama and trauma is what's possible for a human being. And we hold the space as you do your work, and we join together and do this, that we shift the planet, that we shift humanity, and that we get ready for the best year yet of our eternal lives. That's what we hold from you. We hold you in a blessing, and we'll look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. Bring somebody to the show with you tomorrow. Be prepared to call with a question. We love you, and blessings.